I knew something was wrong the moment I opened my mailbox and found the fourth fine in as many weeks. This one claiming my garbage cans were visible from the street for more than 2 hours after collection. The problem was, I had security camera footage showing the truck arriving at 11:30 in the morning and the cans being back in my garage by 12:15. Someone on the Pinewood Estates HOA board in Scottsdale, Arizona, was either incompetent or deliberately targeting me, and I was about to find out which. My name is Marcus Chen, and I had bought my house in this supposedly prestigious neighborhood 3 years ago after landing a senior financial analyst position at a major tech firm. The community looked perfect on paper. Manicured lawns, a clubhouse with a pool, tennis courts, and monthly social events. The HOA fees were steep at $400 monthly, but the real estate agent assured me it was worth every penny. For the first 2 years, I barely noticed the HOA existed. Then Brenda Patterson got elected as president. Brenda was 52 years old with that distinctive haircut that every meme about demanding managers featured. Blonde highlights, aggressively layered, shorter in the back. She drove a white Lexus SUV with a custom license plate that read Blessed One, and had a habit of walking the neighborhood with a clipboard, documenting violations real and imagined. Within 3 months of her taking over, the community Facebook group transformed from friendly neighbor updates into a dystopian nightmare of accusations and fines. The garbage fine was $250. My previous fines included leaving my basketball hoop at the end of my driveway overnight, parking my car on the street during a dinner party when my driveway and garage were full, and painting my front door a shade of gray that was supposedly not on the approved color list, even though I had used the exact paint code from the HOA guidelines. I paid the first 3 fines because I was busy with work and honestly, fighting over $100 here and there seemed like more hassle than it was worth. But when I received that 4th fine, something clicked. I did the math in my head. If Brenda was doing this to me, how many other homeowners was she targeting? Pinewood Estates had 230 homes. At $400 monthly, that was $92,000 coming in every single month, over $1 million annually. Where was all that money going? I pulled up the HOA website that evening, sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop and a beer. The financial reports were supposed to be posted quarterly according to our bylaws, but the last statement available was from 18 months ago, before Brenda took over. I downloaded it and examined the numbers with my professional eye. Everything looked normal. Pool maintenance, landscaping, insurance, utilities for common areas, and a healthy reserve fund of about $200,000 for emergency repairs and future projects. So where were the current statements? I sent an email to the HOA board's general inbox requesting the most recent financial reports, as was my right as a homeowner. 3 days later, I got a response from Brenda herself. Dear Marcus, thank you for your interest in HOA matters. The financial reports are currently being audited and will be made available once the audit is complete. If you have specific concerns, please feel free to attend our monthly board meetings. Regards, Brenda Patterson, HOA President. The tone was dismissive and the response told me nothing. I checked the bylaws again. There was no provision allowing the board to withhold financial reports pending an audit. In fact, Arizona state law required HOAs to make financial records available to homeowners within 10 business days of a written request. I replied with a more formal email, citing the specific state statute and requesting the records within the legal time frame. This time, the response came from the HOA's attorney, a guy named Richard Weber from some law firm in Phoenix. The email was polite but firm, stating that while they acknowledged my right to view records, The current financial documents were incomplete and being reconciled, and providing them in their current state would be misleading and potentially constitute a breach of the board's fiduciary duty. That was lawyer speak for, "We are not giving you anything, and we are daring you to sue us about it." Most people would have given up at that point. Legal battles with HOAs are expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining. But I had spent the last 8 years analyzing financial statements for a living, and every instinct I had was screaming that something was seriously wrong. I started talking to my neighbors. Not the busybody types who lived for HOA drama, but the regular folks who just wanted to live their lives in peace. My next-door neighbor, Tom Richardson, was a retired accountant. We had become friendly over the years, bonding over our shared appreciation for good scotch and our mutual confusion about why anyone cared what color front doors people had. "You are not the only one who has noticed," Tom told me one Saturday afternoon while we stood in his driveway. His wife was at her book club, and he had invited me over to look at some fine notices he had received. My wife and I have gotten 6 fines in the past 4 months. We have lived here for 12 years and never had a single violation before Brenda took over. Now suddenly our mailbox is the wrong shade of black, our hedge is 2 inches too tall, and apparently our porch light is not energy efficient enough. "Have you tried to see the financial records?" I asked. Tom nodded grimly. "Tried and failed, same runaround you are getting. I even showed up at a board meeting and asked directly." Brenda said that homeowners without accounting backgrounds would not understand the complexity of the reports, and that the board would provide a summary in due course. When I mentioned that I was a CPA for 35 years, she got flustered and said they would table the discussion for the next meeting. That was 3 months ago. "So she is definitely hiding something," I said. "Oh, absolutely. Question is what and how do we prove it?" That question kept me up that night. I could not just break into the HOA office and steal records. That would be illegal and would undermine any case I might build. I needed a legitimate way to access the real financial data. Then I remembered something from the bylaws. The annual meeting was coming up in 6 weeks. At the annual meeting, the board was required to present a comprehensive financial report and hold elections for board positions. It was one of the few times when transparency was legally mandated and could not be easily deflected. I started preparing. First, I filed a formal complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA compliance with state law. I documented every email, every request for financial records, every non-response and runaround. Then I started a spreadsheet of every homeowner I knew who had been fined in the past year. I went door to door in the evenings after work, introducing myself to neighbors I had never met, asking if they had experienced an increase in violations and fines. The response was overwhelming. Out of 80 households I managed to speak with, 63 reported a significant increase in fines since Brenda took over. People were frustrated, angry, and scared. Several homeowners mentioned that when they questioned fines, Brenda threatened them with legal action or liens against their property. One elderly couple, the Johnsons, were particularly distressed. They had received a $5,000 fine for unauthorized structural modifications because they had installed a wheelchair ramp for Mrs. Johnson, who had recently had a stroke. "We submitted the architectural request form," Mr. Johnson told me, his voice shaking. "We waited the 30 days like we were supposed to. We never got a response, so we thought it was approved. Now Brenda says we should have waited for written approval, and the fine doubles every month until we remove it or pay up. But my wife needs that ramp. She cannot get in and out of the house without it." I felt my blood pressure rising. "Do you still have proof you submitted the form?" "I have the certified mail receipt," he said, shuffling through a folder of documents. "Send it right to the HOA office, signature required. Someone named Patricia signed for it." Patricia Morris was the HOA secretary, a quiet woman in her 60s who had been on the board for years. She always seemed uncomfortable at meetings, never making eye contact, always deferring to Brenda. "May I make copies of these?" I asked. Mr. Johnson handed me the entire folder. "Take whatever you need. We cannot afford to pay $5,000, let alone more if it keeps doubling. We are on a fixed income." As I went through more homeowner complaints, a pattern emerged. Brenda was not just power tripping. She was systematically fining people for violations that either did not exist or were based on rules she was misinterpreting or making up entirely. And when people fought back, she used the threat of legal action and property liens to force compliance. Most people paid because they could not afford the alternative. But where was all that fine money going? That was the million-dollar question, possibly literally. I decided to take a different approach. If I could not get the information from the board directly, maybe I could get it from vendors. HOAs contract with dozens of companies for various services. Landscaping, pool maintenance, insurance, legal services, accounting. All those companies submit invoices and get paid. If I could track down even a few of those vendors and ask what they were actually billing versus what the HOA claimed to be paying, I might find discrepancies. I started with the landscaping company. Their trucks were in the neighborhood every Wednesday, emblazoned with Desert Bloom Landscaping and a phone number. I called and asked to speak with the owner about potentially hiring them for my personal yard work. I got an appointment with a guy named Miguel Rodriguez. Miguel arrived at my house on a Thursday evening, and we walked around my property while I asked questions about his services. After about 15 minutes of building rapport, I casually mentioned that his company did great work for the HOA. "Thanks, man. Yeah, we have had the Pinewood contract for about 8 years now." "Good steady work," Miguel said. "I am actually trying to get more involved with the HOA," I said, which was not technically a lie. "Do you mind if I ask what the contract runs these days?" "I am trying to understand the budget," Miguel shrugged. "I do not know if I should share exact numbers, but it is not a secret or anything. We bill $4,000 a month for the full service package. Mowing, trimming, seasonal flowers, irrigation system maintenance, the works. $4,000 a month. I made a note of that. Later that evening, I looked up the old financial statement from before Brenda took over. Back then, the HOA was paying $3,500 monthly for landscaping. A $500 increase over 18 months was not unreasonable given inflation and rising labor costs. So that expense seemed legitimate. Next, I tackled pool maintenance. The company was called Aqua Perfect Pool Services. I showed up at their office in Temp on a Saturday morning and spoke with a woman at the front desk. I explained I was a homeowner in Pinewood Estates and was thinking about running for the HOA board, so I was trying to understand our current contracts. "Oh, Pinewood," she said, typing into her computer. "Let me see. Okay, that account is under our commercial maintenance program. Twice weekly service, chemical balancing, equipment checks, and repairs as needed. That runs $2,200 per month." $2,200. The old statement showed $1,800. Again, not an alarming increase. I went through this process with 4 more vendors. The numbers were all slightly higher than the old reports, but nothing that raised red flags. Which meant either the money was disappearing somewhere less obvious, or there were vendors I was not aware of. Then I got lucky. I was at the grocery store when I ran into Patricia Morris, the HOA secretary. She was in the produce section, looking tired and worried. We had never spoken directly before, but I recognized her from board meetings. "Patricia," I said, approaching carefully, "I am Marcus Chen from Pinewood Estates. Do you have a minute?" She looked startled, almost frightened. "Oh, I really should get home. My husband is waiting." "I just need 1 minute, please. It is about the HOA finances." Something flickered in her eyes. "Fear, maybe, or guilt. I cannot talk about that. You need to submit requests through proper channels." "I have tried proper channels. Brenda keeps stonewalling me." "Patricia, I know something is not right. If you know something, anything, please. People are getting hurt." "The Johnsons are about to lose their home because they cannot pay the fine for a wheelchair ramp." Patricia's face crumpled. For a moment, I thought she might cry right there next to the tomatoes. Instead, she glanced around, leaned closer, and whispered, "Annual meeting. I am going to bring everything to the annual meeting. I cannot do this anymore. It is killing me." Before I could ask what she meant, she hurried away, abandoning her shopping cart. I stood there, heart pounding. So Patricia knew something. She was involved somehow, or at least aware of what Brenda was doing. And whatever it was bad enough that Patricia, who had probably never broken a rule in her life, was planning to blow the whistle. The question was, what would Brenda do if she found out? The next 3 weeks were tense. I continued documenting everything, building my case, and preparing for the annual meeting. I created a presentation with all the homeowner complaints, the timeline of events, the lack of financial transparency, and the specific violations of Arizona HOA law. I also reached out to a real estate attorney named Sarah Kim, who specialized in HOA disputes. After reviewing everything I had collected, she agreed to attend the annual meeting as my legal observer. "This is pretty damning circumstantial evidence," Sarah told me during our consultation. "The pattern of fines, the refusal to provide financial records, the intimidation tactics. If the board does not provide a full financial accounting at the annual meeting as required by law, we will have grounds for legal action. But Marcus, be prepared. If there is real fraud here, Brenda is not going to go down without a fight. These situations can get ugly." "Uglier than a $5,000 fine for a wheelchair ramp?" I asked. Sarah's expression was grim. "Fair point. Just watch your back." 5 days before the annual meeting, I received a certified letter from the HOA attorney, Richard Weber. It was a cease and desist, ordering me to stop harassing board members and spreading false and defamatory statements about the HOA leadership. It also threatened legal action if I continued my campaign of interference with HOA operations. I forwarded it immediately to Sarah Kim. She called me within an hour, and I could hear the anger in her voice. "This is a slap suit threat, strategic lawsuit against public participation. They are trying to intimidate you into silence before the meeting. Do not let them. You have done nothing wrong. Talking to your neighbors and requesting financial records is not harassment. It is your legal right. So I just ignore this?" I asked. "I will respond on your behalf. I will make it very clear that you are exercising your rights under Arizona law, and that any attempt to suppress your speech or access to records will result in a counterclaim for attorney fees and damages. Trust me, they will back off once they realize you have legal representation." She was right. 2 days later, I received a terse email from Weber stating that the cease and desist was intended only to ensure proper decorum and channels of communication, and that I was of course welcome to attend the annual meeting and participate in discussion, within appropriate bounds. Translation: they had tried to scare me off, it had not worked, and now they were pretending it had all been a misunderstanding. The night before the annual meeting, Tom Richardson came over with a bottle of the good scotch. We sat on my back patio as the sun set over the Arizona desert, turning the sky brilliant shades of orange and purple. "You ready for tomorrow?" Tom asked. "As ready as I will ever be." I just hope Patricia really does bring whatever evidence she mentioned. Without hard proof, it is going to be my word against Brenda's, and she has the home field advantage. You have got 80 homeowners worth of documentation, Tom reminded me. That is not nothing. And you have got a lot of people on your side. I have been talking to folks too. There are going to be at least 60 or 70 homeowners at that meeting, maybe more. Normally we are lucky if 20 show up. People are fed up. That made me feel slightly better. Strength in numbers. Can I ask you something? Tom said, swirling his scotch. Why are you doing this? I mean, really. You could have just paid the fines, kept your head down, maybe even sold your house and moved. Why put yourself through all this stress and potential legal trouble? I thought about that for a moment. Because it is wrong. Because people like the Johnsons should not have to choose between their home and a wheelchair ramp. Because Brenda should not get to abuse her tiny bit of power just because most people are too tired or scared to fight back. And honestly, because I am good at this. I look at numbers all day. I solve financial puzzles. This is a puzzle and I am going to solve it. Tom raised his glass. To solving puzzles and taking down petty tyrants. We clinked glasses and drank. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. The annual meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. I arrived at 6:30 with Tom, Sarah, Kim, and 3 bankers' boxes full of documentation. The clubhouse was already filling up. I had never seen this many neighbors in one place. Every chair was occupied and people were standing along the walls. I estimated at least 90 homeowners present, maybe more. Brenda was at the front of the room, setting up a laptop and projector with help from 2 other board members. She wore a navy blue blazer and pearls, like she was about to deliver a State of the Union address. When she saw me walk in with my attorney and boxes of documents, her face went pale, then red, then settled into a tight mask of forced pleasantness. "My goodness, we have quite a turnout tonight," she announced in her bright fake voice. "How wonderful to see so many engaged community members. Let us get started, shall we? We have a lot to cover." She launched into her prepared remarks. "Thank you for coming. Appreciation for the board's hard work. Overview of community improvements." She talked for 15 minutes without saying anything of substance. Then she brought up a slideshow. "Now, our financial report. As you can see, our community is in excellent financial health." She clicked to a slide showing a bar graph with unlabeled axes and vague categories like operations and improvements and reserves. The numbers were round figures, clearly estimates rather than actual accounting. Our total revenue this year was approximately $1.1 million, and our expenses were approximately $900,000, leaving us with a healthy surplus that has been added to reserves. "Any questions?" I stood up immediately. "Yes, I have several questions. First, can you provide itemized expenses rather than these broad categories? Second, why are the financial reports not available on the website as required by the bylaws? Third, why have multiple homeowners, including myself, been denied access to detailed financial records, despite making formal requests as allowed under Arizona Revised Statutes, Title 33, Chapter 9? Brenda's smile became even more forced. As I explained in my previous correspondence, Marcus, the detailed reports are being audited and will be available when complete. The summary I have provided is sufficient for the purposes of tonight's meeting." Sarah Kim stood up. "For the record, I am Sarah Kim, attorney at law representing Mr. Chen. Miss Patterson, Arizona law does not allow you to withhold financial records pending an audit. The statute is very clear. Within 10 business days of a written request, you must provide access to all financial records including bank statements, invoices, receipts, contracts, and check registers. You have violated that statute multiple times. Additionally, at an annual meeting, you are required to present a detailed financial report, not a summary with vague categories and round numbers. So I will ask directly, Do you have detailed financial records to present tonight, or are you refusing to provide them? The room went dead silent. Every eye was on Brenda. She looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. Well, the thing is, our accountant has the detailed records and was unable to attend tonight due to a family emergency. What is the accountant's name and firm? Sarah asked. Gerald Thompson. He is an independent contractor. Do you have his contact information so we can verify that? I do not have it with me at the moment. Sarah smiled. It was not a friendly smile. How convenient, so let me see if I understand correctly. You do not have detailed financial records available tonight. You cannot produce an accountant who can verify the summary you have provided. You have repeatedly denied homeowners their legal right to access records. And you expect this community to accept your vague bar graph as adequate financial reporting. Now you listen here, Brenda snapped, her composure cracking. I do not appreciate your tone. I have been working tirelessly for this community, volunteering my time, dealing with difficult homeowners and their constant complaints. I do not have to sit here and be attacked. No one is attacking you, I said, standing again. We are asking for transparency. We are asking for what you are legally required to provide. If everything is legitimate, then showing us the real numbers should not be a problem. Here, someone called from the back. Other voices murmured agreement. Brenda looked around the room, seeing how outnumbered she was, and tried to regain control. Fine. We will table the financial report until next month when our accountant can be present. Now, let us move on to the election of board members. Actually, we are not moving on, came a shaky voice from the side of the room. Everyone turned. Patricia Morris stood up, clutching a large accordion file folder to her chest. She looked terrified but determined. Patricia, Brenda said, her voice sharp with warning. What are you doing? I am sorry, Brenda. I cannot do this anymore. I cannot sleep at night. I thought maybe it was just a little creative accounting that you would pay it all back, but it has gone too far. Patricia walked to the front of the room, her hands trembling. I have the real financial records, all of them. Bank statements, invoices, credit card receipts, everything. Brenda lunged forward like she was going to physically grab the folder from Patricia, but Tom Richardson stepped between them. I do not think so, he said firmly. Patricia, you are making a huge mistake, Brenda hissed. You signed those checks too. You are just as liable as I am. I know, Patricia said, tears streaming down her face. And I will accept whatever consequences come, but these people deserve the truth. She handed the folder to Sarah Kim, who immediately began examining the contents. I moved to look over her shoulder. What I saw made my stomach drop. Bank statements showing the HOA's main operating account with regular transfers to a secondary account I had never heard of. Credit card statements for a card issued to Pinewood Estates HOA, but with charges at high-end restaurants, department stores, a spa in Scottsdale, a luxury resort in Sedona. Invoices from contractors I did not recognize, for work that was never done. And most damning, a spreadsheet in Brenda's own handwriting showing how she had been inflating expenses and pocketing the difference. Oh my God, I whispered. She has been embezzling. Sarah was speed reading through documents, her lawyer brain processing everything. This is bad, really bad. I am seeing over $300,000 in fraudulent expenses and transfers over the past 18 months. Brenda, I strongly advise you not to say anything further without an attorney present. But Brenda had passed the point of rational thought. You do not understand, she shouted. I deserved that money. Do you know how much time I spent managing this community? The complaints, the emails, the late-night phone calls about barking dogs and loud music. I was working 30 hours a week for free. I earned compensation. You are not authorized to compensate yourself, Tom said. Board members are volunteers. That is how HOAs work. That is exploitation, Brenda shot back. You all benefited from my work. Your property values went up because I kept this community looking perfect. I enforced standards. I made Pinewood Estates prestigious, and what did I get? Nothing but complaints and criticism. So you decided to pay yourself $300,000, I said, anger rising in my voice. And when you started running out of money, you created a fine system to generate more revenue. You targeted vulnerable people like the Johnsons. You abused your power and broke the law. I was going to pay it back, Brenda insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. It was just a loan. The HOA has plenty of money in reserves. Sarah was shaking her head while looking at more documents. Actually, according to these bank statements, the reserve fund is almost depleted. You have less than $40,000 left. The HOA should have over $200,000 in reserves according to your own bylaws. Where did it go? The room erupted. Homeowners were shouting questions, demanding answers. Someone yelled that they should call the police. Someone else was crying. It was chaos. I held up my hands trying to restore order. Everyone, please, I know this is shocking and upsetting. But we need to handle this properly. Sarah, what is the next step legally? Sarah closed the folder and faced the room. First, this board is effectively dissolved as of this moment. Under Arizona law, board members have a fiduciary duty to the HOA. Brenda has clearly violated that duty through fraudulent activity. Patricia, by bringing this evidence forward, you are protected as a whistleblower, though you may still face civil liability depending on your level of involvement. Patricia nodded miserably. I only signed the checks because Brenda told me to. She said the transfers were for reserve accounts and maintenance deposits. I should have questioned it more. I should have looked closer. This is partially my fault. We will sort out liability later, Sarah said. Right now, we need to secure all HOA accounts and documents, and yes, we need to contact law enforcement. This is not just civil fraud. Given the amounts involved and the deliberate nature of the scheme, we are likely looking at criminal embezzlement charges. Brenda made a break for the door, but several homeowners blocked her way. Let me through, she demanded. You cannot keep me here against my will. No one is keeping you anywhere, Sarah said calmly, but I would advise you to stay until the police arrive. Running will only make things worse. Police, Brenda's voice went shrill. You are calling the police. This is a civil matter. This is between me and the HOA. $300,000 in theft is a criminal matter, Sarah replied. I am calling them now. She stepped outside to make the call while the room buzzed with shocked conversation. I saw the Johnsons crying with relief. Tom was examining some of the documents Patricia had brought, shaking his head in disbelief. Other board members, the treasurer and vice president, were insisting they had no idea what Brenda was doing, that she had controlled all the finances and shut them out of decision-making. The police arrived within 20 minutes. 2 officers from the Scottsdale Police Department, a Detective Morrison and Officer Huang. Sarah met them outside first to brief them, then they entered the clubhouse. Brenda Patterson, Detective Morrison said. Brenda had collapsed into a chair, all the fight gone out of her. She looked small suddenly and old. Yes. Ma'am, we need you to come with us to answer some questions about financial irregularities with the Pinewood Estates HOA. You are not under arrest at this time, but I strongly suggest you cooperate. I want my attorney, Brenda said quietly. That is your right. Officer Huang, please escort Miss Patterson to our vehicle. As Brenda was led out, she did not look at anyone. No defiance, no more excuses. Just a middle-aged woman who had made terrible choices and was about to face the consequences. Detective Morrison stayed behind to take statements and collect evidence. Sarah handed over the folder Patricia had provided, along with a summary of the situation. I represent several homeowners here, and we are prepared to file a formal complaint. We also have extensive documentation of the fraud. We will need copies of everything, Morrison said. This is going to be a complex case. Financial crimes always are. But from what I am seeing here, you folks have done a lot of the investigative work for us. That will help. Patricia gave her statement through tears, explaining how Brenda had gradually pulled her into the scheme, starting with small irregularities and building to major fraud. I thought about coming forward so many times, but I was scared. Scared of legal trouble, scared of what the community would think. I am so sorry. I should have been braver sooner. You did the right thing tonight, I told her. That took real courage. The police stayed for another 2 hours, interviewing board members and homeowners, collecting documents and photographing evidence. By the time they left, it was after 11 p.m. and everyone was exhausted. But there was also a strange sense of relief in the room. The truth was out. The nightmare was ending. So what happens now? Tom asked as the crowd finally began to disperse. Now we rebuild, I said. We need to elect an emergency board, get a forensic accountant to do a full audit, notify our insurance company about the embezzlement, and figure out how to recover the stolen funds. It is going to be a lot of work. Sounds like you are volunteering, Tom said with a slight smile. I laughed tiredly. I guess I am. Anyone else want to join me on this interim board? Several hands went up. Tom, obviously, Mrs. Johnson. A younger couple, the Patels, who had been fined for having a vegetable garden in their backyard, a retired lawyer named Frank Gutierrez. We had the makings of a functioning board. Sarah agreed to help us navigate the legal process pro bono for the first month, just to get things stabilized. After that, the HOA should retain proper legal counsel, but I will help you find someone good. What Brenda did was unconscionable, but I have to say, Marcus, the way you documented everything and built your case was impressive. You might have missed your calling as an investigator. I drove home after midnight, emotionally drained but also oddly energized. My phone was already buzzing with texts from neighbors thanking me, asking questions, offering to help. The community Facebook group was exploding with activity. Over the next few weeks, the full scope of Brenda's fraud became clear. The forensic accountant we hired discovered that she had stolen a total of $347,000 over 18 months. She had created fake invoices from shell companies, paid herself consulting fees for non-existent services, used the HOA credit card for personal expenses, and transferred reserve funds to accounts she controlled. She had even taken out a line of credit in the HOA's name and spent that money too. The fine system had been designed to both cover her tracks and generate additional revenue to replace what she was stealing. She targeted people she thought would not fight back: the elderly, new residents, anyone who seemed passive or conflict-averse. When people did push back, she used intimidation and threats to force compliance. Patricia Morris was investigated but ultimately not charged criminally. The prosecutor determined she had been manipulated and coerced by Brenda, and her cooperation in exposing the fraud weighed heavily in her favor. She did resign from the board and agreed to participate in restitution efforts. Brenda Patterson was arrested and charged with 13 felony counts including theft, fraud, and forgery. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was not interested in going easy. The case went to trial 6 months later. I testified, as did Patricia and several other homeowners. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, credit card statements, forged invoices, and her own handwritten notes detailing the scheme. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, Brenda tried to give a tearful apology, claiming she had been under financial stress due to medical bills and her husband's job loss. She said she had made terrible mistakes but never meant to hurt anyone. The judge was not moved. "Miss Patterson, you held a position of trust within your community. Homeowners relied on you to act in their best interests. Instead, you systematically stole from them over a period of 18 months. You targeted vulnerable people with fraudulent fines. You threatened legal action against those who questioned you. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a calculated, ongoing criminal enterprise. I am sentencing you to 8 years in state prison, with credit for time served, followed by 5 years of probation. You will also be required to pay full restitution of $347,000 plus interest." Brenda collapsed sobbing as the bailiff led her away. I felt no satisfaction watching it, just a sad sense of waste. She had destroyed her own life over money and ego. The restitution process was complicated. Brenda's assets were seized, including her house, cars, and retirement accounts. That recovered about $190,000. The HOA's insurance policy for board member malfeasance covered another $100,000, though the insurance company fought us for months before finally paying. We were still short about $60,000, which had to be absorbed by the community through a special assessment. That was a tough pill to swallow. Homeowners had to pay extra because of Brenda's crimes, but there was no other choice. We needed to replenish the reserve fund and cover the shortfall. I worked with the new board to structure it as fairly as possible, spreading it over 2 years with hardship exemptions for people like the Johnsons. We also completely overhauled the HOA's operations. New bylaws requiring monthly financial reports posted online. Mandatory annual audits by an independent accountant. A system of checks and balances so no single board member could control the finances. We reduced the fine system dramatically, focusing on genuine community issues rather than petty aesthetic complaints. And we implemented term limits so no one could dominate the board long term. The transformation of Pinewood Estates was remarkable. Within a year, the community Facebook group went from toxic to actually friendly. People started organizing social events again. The Halloween party that year had over 100 attendees. Neighbors helped each other instead of reporting each other. I served 2 terms as HOA president, 4 years total, then happily stepped down to let someone else take over. By that point, the community was healthy financially and socially. The reserve fund was fully funded. We had completed several major improvement projects, including resurfacing the tennis courts and upgrading the pool equipment. And most importantly, people felt safe in their own homes again. Tom and I still meet on my patio sometimes for scotch and conversation. We laugh about the chaos of that annual meeting, the looks on people's faces when Patricia dropped her bombshell, the moment Brenda's mask finally cracked. You know what the crazy thing is? Tom said during one of these evenings, "Brenda really did improve the community in some ways. The landscaping looked better under her watch. She organized good events. If she had just done the job without stealing, she would have been remembered fondly. Instead, she is in prison, and her name is basically a curse word around here." Ego and entitlement are a toxic combination, I said. She convinced herself she deserved compensation, and once she crossed that line, it got easier and easier to justify taking more. "Think you will ever deal with something like this again?" Tom asked. I shook my head firmly. "God, I hope not. Once in a lifetime is more than enough. I just want to live in peace, pay my HOA fees, and not worry about someone stealing them." "Amen to that," Tom said, raising his glass. We drank and watched the sunset paint the Arizona sky in brilliant colors. My garbage cans sat at the end of my driveway, right where they had been since collection that morning. They would stay there until I got around to moving them, which might be tomorrow or might be next week. And nobody was going to fine me for it, because that is how it should be. The Pinewood Estates story became somewhat famous in HOA circles around Arizona. Sarah Kim used it as a case study when training other attorneys on HOA fraud. The Arizona Department of Real Estate updated their oversight procedures partly in response to what happened here. And homeowners in other communities reached out to ask how we had successfully fought back against a corrupt board. My advice was always the same. Document everything, know your legal rights, build coalitions with neighbors, and do not be afraid to bring in professionals when needed. Most HOA corruption relies on apathy and intimidation. Once homeowners organize and demand accountability, the house of cards collapses quickly. 2 years after Brenda went to prison, I got a letter from her. It had been forwarded through the HOA's attorney, probably because she did not know my address. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was surprisingly lucid and free of self-pity. She wrote about taking financial education classes in prison, working in the library, attending therapy. She acknowledged that what she did was wrong, that her justifications had been rationalizations for criminal behavior. She apologized not just generally but specifically, mentioning the Johnsons and their wheelchair ramp, mentioning me and the fraudulent fines. "I know I cannot undo the damage I caused," she wrote. "I will be making restitution payments for the rest of my life, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did not understand then. I was not entitled to that money. I was not being compensated for unappreciated work. I was stealing from people who trusted me. I have to live with that, and I will. I hope Pinewood Estates is thriving. Despite everything, I did care about that community. I just cared about myself more. That was my downfall." I read the letter twice, then filed it away. I did not respond. There was nothing to say. Brenda would serve her time, pay her restitution, and hopefully rebuild some kind of life afterward. That was between her and the justice system. My concern was making sure nothing like this happened to Pinewood Estates again. The final chapter of the story came 3 years after that infamous annual meeting. The HOA held a community appreciation event, and someone suggested we create a memorial of sorts in the clubhouse. Not to Brenda, obviously, but to the lesson learned. We commissioned a plaque that now hangs in the meeting room where homeowners gather each month. It reads, "In memory of the 2023 to 2024 board crisis. Let this community always remember that transparency, accountability, and respect for the law are not optional. Homeowners have rights, board members have duties. When those principles are honored, neighborhoods thrive. When they are violated, communities suffer. May we always choose integrity over convenience, truth over comfort, and justice over silence." Underneath, in smaller text, "Thanks to the courage of whistleblowers and the determination of concerned homeowners, Pinewood Estates was rebuilt on a foundation of trust." May we never take that for granted. Every time we have a board meeting now, I glance at that plaque. It reminds me why I spent so many evenings documenting violations, talking to neighbors, and preparing for a confrontation I was not sure I would win. It reminds me that ordinary people can fight back against corruption and win, but only if they are willing to do the work. My house is still here in Pinewood Estates. The front door is still the same shade of gray, which turned out to be exactly the right shade after all, once we actually checked the paint codes. My basketball hoop sits at the end of the driveway whenever my nephews visit. My garbage cans are visible from the street for hours sometimes, and nobody cares. The community is not perfect. We still have disputes about noise and parking, and all the normal things neighbors disagree about. But we handle them like reasonable adults now. with conversation and compromise rather than fines and threats. The HOA serves its intended purpose: maintaining common areas, organizing social events, and preserving property values through reasonable standards fairly applied. It is amazing how well things work when you remove corruption from the equation. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had just paid those fines and kept my head down. Brenda would probably still be stealing. The reserve fund would be completely depleted by now. More homeowners would have been victimized. The community would have continued its descent into dysfunction and fear, but I did not keep my head down. I asked questions. I demanded answers. I built a case. And when the moment came at that annual meeting, I was ready. Patricia deserves enormous credit for her courage in bringing the real records. Sarah Kim's legal expertise was invaluable. Tom and dozens of other neighbors provided crucial support. It was a team effort. But it started with me, sitting at my kitchen table with a beer and a laptop, looking at a fraudulent fine notice and thinking something is wrong here. It started with the decision to fight back instead of giving in. That is the real lesson of this whole mess. Petty tyrants only have as much power as we give them. Brenda seemed invincible when she was hiding behind legal threats and bureaucratic runarounds. But once people stood up together and demanded accountability, her entire scheme fell apart in a single evening. I hope other homeowners facing similar situations read this and find inspiration. You do not have to be a financial analyst or have an attorney on speed dial to fight back against HOA corruption. You just need to know your rights, document the facts, and have the courage to stand up when everyone else wants to sit down. The garbage cans that started this whole journey are still the same ones I use today. They are just cans, nothing special. But every Wednesday when I put them out for collection, and every Wednesday when I roll them back to my garage at whatever time I feel like it, I think about how close I came to just accepting that fraudulent fine. How much easier it would have been to pay $250 and move on with my life. I am glad I did not. Some things are worth fighting for. Home is one of them. Justice is another. And a community where people look out for each other, instead of looking for violations, is worth every hour I spent preparing for that annual meeting. Pinewood Estates is my home now, truly and completely. Not because the houses are nice or the landscaping is perfect, but because we fought for it together and won. That is a foundation that cannot be shaken by any future board, no matter how corrupt they might be. Because we know now what we are capable of. We know how to fight back, and we know we will win. The sun is setting again over the Arizona desert as I finish writing this, turning the sky those impossible shades of orange and purple that never get old. Tom just texted asking if I want to come over for a drink. The Johnsons are having a barbecue this weekend and invited half the neighborhood. There is a board meeting next Tuesday to discuss resurfacing some walking paths, and it will probably be boring and efficient and exactly what an HOA meeting should be. Life is good in Pinewood Estates. It took fighting through hell to get here, but we made it. And I will never again take for granted what it means to live in a community built on honesty, transparency, and mutual respect. The HOA board that dissolved overnight when I showed up with the real financial records taught me more about courage, justice, and community than I ever expected to learn from a homeowners association. I would not wish the experience on anyone, but I would not trade it for anything either. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. And some victories are sweeter because of how hard we had to fight for them.